Hi everyone, a warm welcome to our audience from many countries in the world. My name is Simon Bentley. I'm chairman of Yad Vashem UK Foundation and I'm addressing you now from London. Today we're having the inaugural lecture of what we intend will be a monthly live Zoom lecture from Yad Vashem. The timing is aimed at what will work best for our UK audience, but a recording of this lecture will be made available for global viewing. Continuing caution in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic means that Yad Vashem's Holocaust History Museum has not yet received permission from the Israeli Ministry of Health to reopen, and international travel has all but stopped. We are, though, fortunate that Yad Vashem is bringing its unrivaled wealth of knowledge to us in the comfort of our homes via Zoom lectures, with weekly email communications updating us about its online activities. The Yad Vashem website, which is easily accessible on yadvashem.org, is an incredible resource. One can listen to lectures, read articles, attend courses, and access information from 3 online databases. Highly recommended. Today, we have the privilege of hearing Dr. Haim Gertner, Director of the Yad Vashem Archives and Fred Hillman Chair for Holocaust Documentation, who will be speaking on the topic, The Search for 6 Million Names. Haim has in the past been our guest in the UK. We can look forward to a fascinating and highly informative presentation. Since its inception in 1953, Yad Vashem has worked tirelessly to collect the names of each and every Jewish man, woman, and child murdered in the Holocaust and thereby remember them. Quoting the late Professor Elie Wiesel, Auschwitz survivor and author, Yad Vashem is the heart and soul of Jewish memory. Today, Yad Vashem's Hall of Names houses 2.75 million pages of testimony, and the online central database of Shoah victims' names includes over 4,800,000 names. Dr. Gertner will present a fascinating look behind the scenes at this unique endeavor, including a glimpse of documents rarely viewed by the public. Haim, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be here with you this evening. And I'll share with you what we do and our vision about the search for the 6 million through a few examples. Let's start with this. This is a regular house, apartment building, which is located in the old Jewish quarter of Berlin, in Gross Hamburger Straße. This is where I go every time, you know, in those days that you could travel, every time that I visit Berlin. The building was bombed in February '45 and was renovated and has today 2 out of 3 entrances. The middle one is empty. The French artist Christian Boltanski and his students conducted a research in the Berlin Municipal Archives and discovered all the information that they could find about the inhabitants that used to live in this middle entrance that was bombed by the Allies at the end of the war. Most of them were Jews. So they put placards, like in a museum, and in the apparent place of each one of the apartments. And you can see now those placards with the dates. The last date is usually 42, 43, the dates of deportation, the family name, and the profession of the family that was living there. Whenever I'm in Berlin, I visit this monument because for me, it's very, very meaningful. For me, precisely because of the void. When I'm there, suddenly the whole building, the entire street, Berlin, Germany, all of Europe, change their appearance and in my imagination become a sea of empty holes. The lack of material manifests in a most incredibly effective way, for me at least, the void that was created by the annihilation of the Jews during the Holocaust, during the Shoah. Yad Vashem was established to deal with this void and to commemorate the loss in a way that is meaningful for each one of the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. The aim of Yad Vashem is to give each one of them back their faces and identities, exactly as its name implies, Yad Vashem, a memorial and a name. This is the reason for one of the main missions of Yad Vashem, to gather all the approximately 6 million lost faces and identities. So since 1953, we collect what we call pages of testimony. This is, by the way, a rare footage that we found a few years ago from the very beginning of the collection of the pages of testimony, 55 already. So people submitted those one-page questionnaires in memory of friends or family members, and it is different than what we are usually called a testimony, an oral testimony, which is the life story of someone who survived. In this case, you are commemorating someone else that you know that was murdered in this page of testimony. In 1999, we had a national campaign aiming to collect more pages, and we computerized all of them and created the online central database of Shoah victims' names, which is actually a combination of all the efforts that were done until today by Yad Vashem and others in order to decipher all the names of the Jews who were murdered during the Shoah. When it was first uploaded online to the Yad Vashem website, we had there information on some 2,700,000 Jewish victims. So it was then that we realized, or actually a bit before, in the 90s, that pages of testimony are extremely important to reconstruct the missing names, but it is not enough. Because in a lot of cases, no Jews were left to testify, because, you know, the Nazis took an entire community, especially in the eastern side of Europe, and all of them were vanished in a day. So we decided to use all other sources, and we extended our efforts beyond pages of testimony by actively gathering and processing everything in a very unique way. And I'll explain a bit what we did. I'll do it through one example first. This is a bit late example. It's from 2008, so 12 years ago. And this is in order to show you the challenge, but also the benefit of doing so. So this is a challenge that someone shared with us in 2008. There was a group of Israelis who wanted to make the March of the Living in Poland, and their guide told them that there is this matzeva, this stone, in a Christian cemetery. You see the cross on the right side, commemorating the murder of some 45 prisoners from Auschwitz, and you have no names on it, only numbers. And the story is like that. It's connected to a death march that started its march from Auschwitz in January 18th, 1945. The Germans forced the prisoners to march towards the west, toward Germany, and some 80 kilometers west to Auschwitz, they started to shoot them in the middle of the woods because they thought the partisans were coming to liberate them. So 45 of them were lying dead on the snow. In the middle of the night, the local priest in the nearby village, Krznice, decided to come and buried them in the local cemetery near the local church in Krznice, in this small village. They had no names, but he wanted to write something. So he asked his assistant to write down something. So the assistant copied down on this small note the tattoo numbers that they had on their arms and the signs on the uniforms. And this is what he copied down later on the stone. So this is what we have for more than 70 years. A stone with numbers and prisoner signs. That's what we have. So again, going back to the group have heard about it, and they say to us, well, we want to erect another stone here, but now with the names. We want to do something in this March of the Living. We don't want only to be there. Can you help us? So because of all of what we did, and I'll share with you later on what we did, but at least I will start from the result, we could do it. And in a few weeks, we found most of the names, not all of them, because in part of the cases, like the last two, you see bez numer in Polish means without a number. In part of the cases, we assume that maybe the numbers were copied down wrongly. But in most of the cases, we know the names. Most of them are Jews, part of them non-Jews. In part of the cases, we know more than a name. Let's take, for example, prisoner number 43405. You see it over here. We know who was it. It was David Pastel, the guy on the left. He was born in Poland, moved to France, married a young Jewish lady. They had a son, Aharon. You see him on the right. He had no French passport, so they took him to transit camp Bon-la-Rolla, not far from Paris. And from there, in transport number 5, he was deported quite in the beginning to Auschwitz, where he stayed unusually a long time, because most of the Jews who arrived in Auschwitz waited a few hours and then were murdered. But in his case, he stayed almost until the end. You saw he was murdered only on the way to Germany. So he stayed there from 42 until 45. It's quite a long time. And therefore, although the Nazis burned all the archives in Auschwitz and didn't record almost any, actually most of the Jews who were coming there were not registered at all, but in his case, he is registered here and there. So we have a page of testimony that his son Aharon, who survived in hiding, filled out in Yad Vashem later on. We have his name in a deportation list. We have him in a Passover Eve, in Leila Seder, and his personal car from Bon-la-Rolla in 42, in April 42. He appears in a lot of documents, actually. But the challenge is that it is spread all over the world. Part of that is situated in Yad Vashem, in the archives, but part of that is in the very small remainings of the archives in the Auschwitz Museum in Poland, part of that in Paris, in Memorial de la Shoah, part of that in the middle of nowhere, in a very big archive in the middle of Germany, the Arlsen archive. So it is spread all over the world. No archive is recording its documents on the level of a specific person that appears in a document in a file. This is not the way archives do it. So we have a challenge here, first to gather everything, but even if we gather it, we have to know that there is some information about David Pastel, some David Pastel that moved from Poland to Paris in all those places. How do we do it? This is a unique challenge that we have to face. In this case, we could do it. I'll show you later on how. But before showing you how, I want to speak very briefly about the relevancy. Is it worth doing it? Well, this is, on the right side, David Pastel, not the one who was murdered, but the grandson, the son of Aharon, who survived. He is named after David Pastel, who was murdered in Auschwitz, or on the way out of Auschwitz. He is here when we inaugurated the new stone, when the group did it. You see, this is the old one over here in the middle, and this is the new one with the names on it now. So in this event in 2008, he came from Paris. He is still living in Paris, David Pastel, and said Kaddish and said, well, for me, you closed the circle. I, of course, know the story by heart. I'm named after my grandfather, but I didn't have any clue that there is a date, that there is a yahrzeit, that there is a date for the murder of my grandfather, and that I can say Kaddish on this specific place. So for him, it was the most incredible moment in life. This is how he expressed it. But not only for him, it is matter. The guy over here on the left is the local priest of Książnice. So in his case, this is his legacy, the legacy of Książnice, of the former priest that was there and did this, human act and buried the 45 people over there. It is important for him and for his community as well. But for me, there is a third, no less important, maybe the most important group here, and those are the youngsters who are standing behind. This is the group. This is the group that made the research with us, using the resources of Yad Vashem. For them, David Pastel was not by no means a relative, but he became a relative after they did this search at the Yad Vashem archives. Now David Pastel is theirs because they looked in his eyes, they saw him. They could decipher, they could locate his story, his life story, and do something to commemorate him in a way which is meaningful for them. So what we do in that case matters, not only for the first generation, but for us, for the next generations as well. So therefore, because of the challenge, but also the option that we have, we decided at Yad Vashem to collect everything and to use it not only alongside with using it as a regular historical source. You know, historians, researchers are using it every day. You use it every day, I assume. But alongside with that, we decided to use it in a very sophisticated and clever way to find information about individuals, about the Jewish victims. So for that, we are collecting 3 types of material. We collect originals from all over the world. We collect some 30,000 a year from the public, photographs, documents, artwork, artifacts, film footage, etc. Everything that someone has at home and has meaning or context or half context or something. We also continue to collect tirelessly Holocaust survivors' testimonies, oral testimonies. You know, in those last 4 months, we couldn't, unfortunately. But until the beginning of the virus, we collected, and if to talk only on last year, 1,300 a year, only in Israel. But the most incredible amount of documents that we are collecting are scans and copies of documents that we scan all over the world. I have some 50 teams that are traveling all over the world, especially in the last few years in Central Eastern Europe, and they locate and scan some 10 to 15 million pages of documents in all archives that you may imagine all over the world. So we have today the largest collection of Holocaust-related material, originals, tens of millions of originals, alongside with a lot of tens of millions of copies that we are copying all the time. Why is it so important? It is so important because of the problem that we have, or the challenge that we have in the East as we go, as less as we know. We know most of the names of the victims, of the Jewish victims who were murdered on the Western side of Europe. We don't know all the histories, but we know at least the names. But if we speak about the names of the people who were murdered on the Eastern side of Europe, again, as east as we go, as less as we know, because let's take the Ukraine, for example. In a day, the Einsatzgruppen, the special units that the Nazis had there, came in the morning, took everyone from the village and murdered all the village in a day or in a few hours. So everything was vanished. So we don't have anyone to testify. So this is why the challenge in the East is much extreme. So what we do by gathering, processing the documents that we have is assisting us. Let's take an example. The example is connected to Latvia. Latvia had an impressive amount of Jews before the war, some 90,000 Jews, 70,000 of them were murdered. So this is one page of testimony that was filled out in 57, as you can see down there, by someone. It was filled out in Hebrew. You may fill it out in every language you want. We have it in a lot of languages. So Ben-Zion Coleman from Tel Aviv submitted it in 57. So quite in the very beginning of the project, which started in 53, as I mentioned. And he commemorated Mr. Greenman. Mr. Greenman, I'm calling him because when he had to write his private name, his first name, he added a question mark because he didn't know or didn't remember the first name. He remembered only the last name, Greenman. He knew that he was born in Latvia, in a place called Libau. Libau is Liepāja. It's a well-known seaport on the western side of Latvia. And he wrote in Hebrew that he was about 50 and that he was the principal of the Jewish school in Libau, in Latvia. You see Libau. And that he was murdered by the Nazis. He also mentioned that he had 3 kids, Edia, Eric, and Lucia. So the nicknames, he didn't remember the correct names, only the nicknames. And he remembered one age of one of them, Eric. Eric was 8 years old over here. The other 2, also question marks. We don't even know the name of his wife. We don't know what happened to his wife because it is not mentioned here. So we know from 57 that there was such a person, a principal of a Jewish school. We know that he was murdered with his 3 kids, but we have a lot of question marks. And this is very, very regular. Even if someone remembered something, he didn't remember everything. Some 10 years ago, we had the luck, after a long period of negotiations with the Latvian government, we had the luck to have an agreement, an excellent agreement with them. And since then, we are copying hundreds of thousands of documents every year, all over Latvia. We started in Riga, and we started in the Ministry of Education. We located all the files of educators in Latvia, and out of them, we took the Jewish files, I mean, the files of the Jewish educators and principals. This is from the personal file of Boris or Ber Greenman, who wanted to be a veterinarian. This is from his personal file in the archives of the Ministry of Education in Riga. So in 21, he wanted to be a veterinarian, as you can see here. A year later, he changed his mind and decided to be a teacher. So this is his student card from 22. A year later, he married a Jewish lady. Her name was Sheina. She was from Riga. How do I know it? Because we copied and located documents not only in the Ministry of Education, but also in the archives of the Ministry of Interiors. And there we found half of the passports of the Jews in Latvia. Why? Because when you have to replace your passport, you leave the old one by the authorities. Somehow they didn't throw it out, so we have it. So we have some 45,000 passports like that. This is the passport that was belonged to Ber Greenman. And here in Latvian, if you know to read Latvian, you can see that he married Sheina a year before. Back to the Ministry of Education. He moved 140 kilometers to the west, to Liepāja, Libau, and became the headmaster, the principal of the Jewish school in Liepāja in 38. You know, when you enter a new job, you have to fill out this paper. So you have a lot of information, personal information here. And then we found in Riga 40,000 books like that of house committees. Now, house committees are not for electricity or for water, as you may imagine. It's Big Brother. They wanted to know who's living where and when. So in each one of the buildings, in this regime, you had someone who registered everyone, all the moves. So this is the book from Peldu 51. So we took the Jewish streets, if I may call it like that. So this is from Peldu 51 and the corner of Liepu 3. In this building in the corner, in Liepāja in 38, the Greenmans lived. You see it here on the last line. So we have an address. Actually, they moved from a place to a place, but this is the last one in 38. And this is maybe the last sign of life. This is a German population census. This is a counting of all the Jews in Liepāja in August 41. And why did the Germans did it? This is from another collection that we copied somewhere else years before. And why was it so important for the Germans in that case? Because a few months later, they took all the Jews from Liepāja to a killing pit and murdered all of them out of town. So here we have the whole accurate information for August 41. We have the name Greenman Ber, we have the wife Sheina, and we have the correct full names of the 3 kids, Esther, Ariel, and Leah. And we have the dates of birth, etc., etc. If you take boring, let's admit, boring bureaucratic documents and gather them and do it in a way that knows to connect the dots, that knows to say, well, this and that are belonging to the same person, to Ber, to Boris, to Greenman, to a question mark, Greenman, then you are bringing back to life the faces, the histories, the life stories of an individual, a family, a community that were vanished, and except the documents, the boring documents that we are collecting, have no other evidence. This is why we do it. This is why it is so fruitful. This is why it is so helpful when we talk about locating the missing names from Central Eastern Europe. So now you can see it online in the central database of Shoah victims' names. For example, this. If you write Ber Greenman, you'll find all the documents that I showed you. Which means actually that we moved. We moved now to another stage in when we talk about the memory of the Jews who were murdered in the Holocaust. My father is a Holocaust survivor. He's now 92 years old. I hope him a good health. He's okay. But for him, a page of testimony was enough. Why? Because he knew all of them. So they are there in front of his eyes every day, every moment. But for me and for my kids, it is not enough. My kids need a face. They need a story. They need something that they do with the face and the story. For them, gathering all those fragments, all those entries, name entries, I mean, a name that appears in a document, from here, from there, and from there, and gathering them together and trying through that to try to understand who were they, what happened to them, where did they live before the war, what happened to them during the war, did they survive or not, and why. This is the way they are now becoming aware to the story of the Holocaust. So I think it's a generational a new stage. So what we do now, by gathering all those other layers, levels of memory, all those building blocks of memory, not only one single page of testimony, but a lot of other documents that may be connected to that, this is something which is helpful for our kids, for the next generation. We were quite successful, I would say. And since the beginning of the project in 55, especially after we launched it in November 2004, we almost doubled the amount of names that we have in the database. So we have today more than 4.8 million names of individual victims in our database, which is quite a lot. I mean, it's almost doubling the amount of data that we have there in some 15, 16 years, which is very impressive. But I would ask you to look not only on that, but on another number that we have here. It is not only the number of individual victims that we have now, we tripled. It is 3 times more name entries that we have in the database than we had in the beginning in 2004. Name entry means, as you saw before, a document that has information, one document that has information about a specific person. So you saw that as long as we are continuing in the project, we have more and more cases that we have more than one indication about a person. You saw a few good examples. I mean, in most of the cases we have 1, maybe 2, but in more and more cases, we have 3, 4, even 10 indications or name entries, which means that it is not only the names that we know, but also the building blocks of the life story that we have now, which is of course very important. So now we have a new challenge. And the challenge is, okay, before we had some 3.5, 3.4 million entries. It's quite a lot. Today we have close to 10 million entries. How do I know to connect the dots? How do I know that this and that are connected to the same person? And this is really an issue. It's not only it is not only bothering us, it is bothering all security services in the world now when they want to know how to connect the dots. But in our case, we created our own tools, and the most known one is the tool of the variants of the names and the places. And this is a favorite example that I have, the first name Avraham, a well-known Jewish name, which has more than 1,000 variants in documents that we have in the Yad Vashem archives. So people wrote Avraham in more than 1,000 ways, correctly, incorrectly, nicknames, short names, Avi, Avraham, Avremale, they wrote it in different languages, in different fonts. So we had to take all those variants in account because we don't know what was the name that the person or the document used. So behind the scenes, I have an excellent team of the experts in Jewish names and Jewish places in Europe in the 20th century. And all over the day, they are trying to match all the variants and to make some sort of organization in this mess and assist us to know how to deal with that. So even without knowing, when you are using our databases, actually you have this knowledge behind the scenes. So this is an example of things that we are doing behind the scenes by our own in order to enhance, in order to enable us, ourselves, to make the match, to make the matching and to say, well, this, that, and that are connecting to the same person. But we are now exactly in the stage where we also need you, the users, the clever users. And this is exactly where we are now in the new feature that we added to our names database online. We call it the cluster feature or the personal file feature. What does it mean? It means that we enable the public, the users, you, to search in our database and to offer us matching, to say, well, this, that, and that are connected to the same person, we think. And we have now the ability to let you do it or offer it to us. And we have the tools, very, very clever tools to check it and quite quickly approve it or not. And then a few times a year, we are uploading it online and then expanding our knowledge about the files of knowledge about one person. I'll give you one example, which I found recently. Well, we have 2 pages of testimony that might be connected to the same person. This is something that our machine found because there was enough information here that enabled us to claim that it might be the same person. You see, the name of the person here was Yuda in Hebrew, Libel with A and J in English or in Latin characters, and Broder over here in Yiddish. He was living in Będzin. Będzin is a well-known town in Poland. Some 21,000 Jews used to live there before the war, quite a big town. And he was born, it is said here, in 1912. The lady who submitted it is the aunt, Dvora Zilberstein, who survived, and she filled it out in 1955, quite in the very beginning of the project. So we have a page of testimony. She didn't know, she didn't write at least, where was he murdered? This is what she knew in 55. 2 years later, another page of testimony about Label Broder from Będzin, Poland, the same names of the parents, Mendel and Fege, so it might be the same person. He was a merchant. The profession here and there was merchant from Będzin. Here we don't have the date of birth, but the person who filled it out knew the year of the murder, he thought, 1942, Auschwitz. This is what he wrote here. And the person who did it was the brother, Aaron Broder, 2 years later. So our machine matched between the two. Okay. But then someone, 2 months ago, looked in our photo collection and said, well, I saw in your photo collection a collection of some 5,000 photos that the Nazis took or forced the Jews to take in the middle of the ghetto that was opened in 43. And one of them is Broder Yuda Leib Israel, born on February 15, 1912 in Będzin. So again, Yuda Leib, 1912, it might be the same person. It is, I think it is the same person. So now we have the ability to let you match it. So we launched a new campaign, Creating Personal File for Holocaust Victims. I'm calling all of you to test it, to join us in this campaign. So you have the ability to say, well, this and that are the same item. They're connected to the same person, to the same victim. You may even compare the documents, compare the data here and there in all 3 records, and well, decide, well, because it looks almost the same, we think it's correct. So today, when you'll enter our database, you'll find the 3 entries that are related to Leib Yuda Broder. You see the number 3 over here, which says that this is, in this file, in this personal file, we have 3 items that are connected to that specific person. But if you look carefully, you'll see that there are 2 other Yuda Broders above and below. In this case, above, it might be not the same person because the year of birth is 8080, the place is different in the Ukraine, so it might be not the same. But here, it's Będzin, so maybe this is connected to that specific person. Quite interesting. And why didn't anyone connect it before to Yuda Leib Broder? Well, the reason is like that. This is the document. This is a brutal list of Jews who were murdered by gunshot during an attempt to escape from the deportation from Benjin during the week of 22nd and 26th of June 1943. June 22nd was exactly the beginning of the destruction of the end of the ghetto in Benjin. The Nazis took all the Jews and destroyed the ghetto and sent all of them to murder. During this week, there was a reveal. A group of people, a group of Jews decided to escape. And somehow, unexpectedly, this year, in a campaign, in a gathering campaign, in a project that we are leading in Poland, we found this document and we scanned it in an archive in Benjin. And look who is the first one in the list. Broder Yehuda Leib Israel. He was born in he was 31 years old, which means that he was born in 1912. So this is exactly the same person. It is very rare to find an information about that, and much more rare to know that he was buried, and because this is a brutal list from Benjin. So this is really a miracle in that sense. For the family, it matters. I assume that there is a family. Now, why didn't anyone found it before? Because we gathered it only during this year, and it was uploaded to the database only 2 months ago in a regular procedure that we have. But now it is open to you to say, well, this document is the end of the story. This document is closing up everything. It is not in Auschwitz that he was murdered, and it is not in 42 that he was murdered. He was quite a brave guy, and he was connected to a group that tried to escape and was murdered and was buried there in the first week of the last, actually on the last week of the ghetto in Benjin, alongside with 58 other Jews that we have in this list. I would like to end my presentation and leave also some time for questions with this last example. Behind each item in the collection that we have people. This is obvious, but this is exactly the challenge, and this is exactly why we do all what we do. So Tzipora and Dov Cohen, when the war broke out, were a young couple who had already experienced the loss of one child during childbirth. And when, with the German invasion of Lithuania, they unsuccessfully tried to escape, to flee to the Soviet Union, but returned back to their home in Kovno, in Kaunas, in Lithuania, and were later interned in the Kovno ghetto. Approximately half a year later, on January 18th, 1942, Tzipora gave birth to a daughter who she named Hinda, after her mother. At the end of November 1943, the couple was transferred to a forced labor war camp whose inmates worked in an airport in very difficult conditions, not far from Kovno. During the day, the men and the women would go off to work, and only the children and few older adults stayed to be there with the children. On March 27, 1943, trucks arrived in the camp. The adults were taken out through a different gate than the usual one, so that they would not see the trucks and disrupt the deportation. When the adults returned at the end of the day to the forced labor camp, they discovered the extent of the tragedy. No children remained in the camp. This terrible event was later on perceived by them and was called by them the children's action, the children's action. Dov and Tzipora went to their daughter's bed, where they found only the birth certificate, the gloves that Tzipora made, and one shoe on their daughter's bed. When they found the gloves and the shoe, they swore to save the shoe forever. And Dov inscribed the date of the murder on the other side of the shoe. Dov and Zipporah later on returned to the Kovno ghetto, and from there they fled to the forest. They were liberated by the Russian army in 1947. Zipporah gave birth to another daughter. In 1960, they immigrated to Israel. Dov and Zipporah requested from their family in their will to give their daughters' items to Yad Vashem. And with their passing, their granddaughter actually gave the items of Hinda Cohen, who was murdered at Auschwitz, to Yad Vashem. And we also have the page of testimony that the parents filled out. We do not have a photo of Hinda, but we have a page of testimony and an artifact that tells her story. So it is not only the search for the 6 million that we lead, it is the search for the one face of one Jewish victim out of the 6 million that we want to have. Thank you very much.
Haim,
Yes.
there are a few questions which I'd like to pose for you from people who've written in. One question from anonymous attendee is, what is the best way to teach the lessons of the Holocaust in the countries which are disconnected towards it?
I mean, it's a very big question. And if I want to relate my answer to the lecture that I gave, I think that there are a lot of ways to do it, and a lot of challenges also. We have challenges in countries which are connected, which are no less complicated, but also in countries which are disconnected. But I think that what works, first and foremost, is the ability to look in someone's face. If you are, and this is exactly what I try to show you. Although we are talking about 6 million, what I wanted to show you is that we are talking about 6 million individuals. And when you may look on someone's eyes, when you may reconnect yourself to stories in a context, I mean, I think it has to be in the correct context. And to ask yourself, if you are a non-Jew, for example, whom did we lose? Who were my neighbors? Why the neighbors are not here anymore? Who were the people who used to live there and disappeared by others in those far countries? I think that by that, you are connected yourself to the story and look on someone's face. This is why I think it's so powerful. This is why today, a lot of excellent projects that I think are working educationally in a lot of countries are those that youngsters, that students are doing in their places, trying to locate the missing, the void that I presented in the beginning, and ask questions about this void. When you are not connected to a place, when you're not living in a place that was in the midst of the events, then the question might be about people that you know or that you're interested in. It might be if you have neighbors or relatives or someone that you know that was there, then this is maybe some connector, but not necessarily. I think that the ability to be connected to human beings, to life stories of individuals, is one of the ways to do it. Again, it's only one aspect, and I don't want to go further on because I want to be concentrated much more to the lecture that I gave.
There's another question here.
Yes.
How do your archives differ from those of the US Holocaust Museum, if at all? Do you have shared archives?
First, we have a lot of common ground, but also differences, because they are federal. They are interested in the fate of all victims in the Second World War, in the Holocaust, including non-Jewish ones, and we are interested first and foremost in the fate of Jews during the Holocaust. So our main interest is the fate of Jews, Jewish victims in the Shoah. But taking this in account, we are cooperating in a lot of aspects of gathering documents. We decided some decade ago that it is better to go to Eastern Europe and to negotiate together with the state archives there and to pay less, half price or a bit less or more, and to share the data. So we do it almost jointly all over Central Eastern Europe whenever legally and politically possible. This is a very, very interesting and powerful project that we lead together. As to the indexing of names, this is much more unique to Yad Vashem because the tools that we created, the multilingual tools and all the tools of variants and all of that, and even the ability to have a very, very big group of indexers, of people who are computerizing the data in some 60 languages, and that are using computer sciences expertise to take knowledge that we are finding in a lot of places and migrate it into our database. This is unique, the uniqueness of Yad Vashem. But again, we are being assisted with a lot of very, very, very small and even big initiatives all over the world, because there are a lot of people that are being interested in the fate of individuals in their hometown or in their family or institutions that are doing it in specific states. So we are trying to share information, to exchange information with all of them, and to create the central database of Holocaust victims' names as the central hub for all of the information that we have.
Okay. There's a similar question here. There are many who hold information about Holocaust victims. What is being done to connect all of these archives? United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Yad Vashem, Red Cross, Arolsen, etc.
First, I hope that what I showed you is showing that the way to do it is by cooperating with others. But what we do, for example, with the Arolsen archives, for those of you who doesn't know what are the Arolsen archives are a very big archives in the middle of nowhere in Germany, in a very, very small shtetl, a small town. It is called Arolsen, Bad Arolsen. And the Allies gathered their tens of millions of documents that they captured from the Germans when they liberated Europe. And it is being led since then, since the end of the war, by 11 states that has the authority to lead the place, including Israel and the States and a few 9 other countries in Europe. And Yad Vashem has a complete copy of the whole collection since the 50s. But in recent years, they scanned everything again. And so we and a few others have copies of that. But it was not connected to the collections, to the other collections. So what Yad Vashem offered them in the last few years is to use our technology and our tools, our data tools. And actually, we upload now their collection using the Yad Vashem resources, using the Yad Vashem technology, using the Yad Vashem knowledge and knowledge tools that we have. So when you'll enter today the Arolsen Archives site online, you'll see it as if it is Arolsen, but actually it is situated in the Yad Vashem servers, and you'll see down there that it is done in cooperation with Yad Vashem and using all the variant tools, for example, that I shared with you before for the first time. So actually today we have the ability to use our technology and knowledge as a platform for all other collections. And I assume that in the coming years, this will be the direction, because a lot of institution has a lot of knowledge, but not enough options to share or to connect it to the other collections. And what we offer now is a way to be separate, but still be connected. So we give each one of the institutions its own uniqueness and independent way of working, but still using the same technology. We assume that this will be the way for the coming years. So the Arolsen collection is, what we did with the Arolsen collection in the last few years is an excellent example for that. This is the way we think.
Another question, Haim, is the collection or part of the collection digitized? Is the information on a document also translated into English, as I don't speak or write Hebrew?
Yes, so because of this is another aspect of the clever way we work. I'll mention it only briefly. We are working with a very, very clever set of keywords. So everything that we index is done with a lot of sets of keywords, and we translate the keywords into few languages. So actually the names database appears in the Yad Vashem site in 6 languages. So you may use it in Russian, in German, in French, in Russian, in Hebrew, in English. So you don't have to know Hebrew in order to use the database. You may use it in all other languages, of course, English, because we translated all the keywords and all the information and data that we have around it. So you don't have to know the language of even the language of the document, but still use it.
Okay. Another question is there a database for transport lists, specifically Lodge Poland?
Well, the issue of transportation or transport list is very complicated because only from few states we have the remaining transport list, especially from Western countries, not all of them. We have it from France, we have it from the Netherlands, from Belgium, for example, but we don't have all deportation lists from other places. We don't have the deportation list, for example, from Hungary. And of course, we don't have the whole deportation list, only very, very few fragments of lists from Poland. So Yad Vashem, the International Institute for the Research of the Holocaust in Yad Vashem, launched a decade ago a very, very sophisticated, promising project online, which is using all the sources that I showed you and trying to reconstruct all the transports. You may find it in our database. It appears in our database. I'm trying to see if I can show it now, if it's not too complicated to show it to you. But in any case, this is the place to start to find deportation from or inside Europe towards Poland and inside Poland. We moved now from the project moved from Western Poland to Eastern Europe now, and Poland is the next stage. This is very, very complicated. I'll try to share it now with you. I have it here, only briefly to show you that it is existing, and you'll scroll it and examine it later on. So this is transports to extinction, Holocaust, Shoah deportation database. You may enter a place or use the map over here and try to find whatever you want. You have on a specific deportation, you have testimonies, you have the list of names, if we have the list of names on the deportation, etc., etc. It is very, very powerful. This is exactly another level of our abilities. It is not only the names or the documents that we are collecting, but also the ability to have another layer on that, another level, and ask research or infrastructural kind of research questions using all the data that we have about the victims, as in the deportation database over here.
There are 2 more related questions. The first one is, are there any archives which you have not managed to see? And can you say which they are? And the related question to that is, do you anticipate a day when you can say you found every name, and what will that take?
Wow, 2 big questions, but very important ones. So I'll relate to both of them. As to archives that we don't have yet, I want to share with you a personal example, if I may. Okay, so this is over here, my grandmother, the lady in the middle, and 3 of her daughters. She was living in Poland, in a town called Pilica. It is not so far from Radom, not so far from Warsaw, actually. It's 2.5 hours from Warsaw. Actually, very close to Częstochowa, to those who are familiar with the map of Poland. And this is actually the last photo that we have from her, because in a very sunny day, they went out of their place in Pilica, from their apartment, and took the photo in order to send it to my grandmother, who was the only family member who immigrated to Palestine, to Israel, before the war in 1935. How do I know that it was there? Because of the door over here. you see, this is a wooden synagogue, the wooden synagogue of Pilica, and the door is over here. This is the door of the synagogue. The synagogue was burned, as all of the other wooden synagogues in Poland. So I know that it was in front of their house because this is where they lived, in front of the synagogue. You see here a small child. This is the child of this lady. So a cousin of my mother. He is here at the age of 2 years old or something like that. We have 2 other photos from him, and that's all. So we knew that we had a cousin. We knew that he was murdered, but we had no name of the cousin. And this is maybe this is one of the most problematic gaps that we have in the names database, because even if we know names of all people or I mean, people that had connections and relatives, the names of the children of the youngsters are in most of the cases unknown, until we understood that we have to look in the municipal archives. And in this case, there was an ability to copy the municipal archives in this place. And there you can find, in the years before the war, the birth certificates, handwritten. And this is the birth certificate of this child. And here you see that his name was Shlomo. So we know now the name Shlomo. Now, having access to birth certificates in towns and shtetls in Poland is forbidden legally in Poland. So this is, for example, a huge issue. If we want to decipher, if we want to know all the names of the kids that were born just before the war, we have to have access to those places. And in Poland, the situation is becoming very, very complicated in recent years. It is not so easy because of data protection laws, not only in Poland, but all over Europe, to copy documents. So this is an example of the challenges of in archives that we still have in Eastern Europe as well as in Western Europe. In the Netherlands, for a lot of years, we couldn't copy documents with names of Holocaust victims because of the data protection laws in the Netherlands. Only in recent years it was resolved by the government or by the authorities, by the legal authorities in the Netherlands. So even in Western Europe, we still have problems. There are places that are still unknown for us. We started to copy in Serbia, in the archives of the military, of the Ministry of Defense, only 2-3 years ago. We have there millions, tens of millions of documents that no one opened. It is still packed in the packages. It is connected to the murder of Jews and non-Jews by the Ustasha, the local Croatian troops that assisted the Nazis to murder Jews alongside with others. It was not even opened. So we still have a lot of places that were not even opened, especially in Central Eastern Europe. And even in places that were open, we still have a lot of problems in entering into the archives because of legal restrictions. So this is about the first question. We are doing our best, and I'm calling it a window of opportunities. This is why I think we have to be very, very quick and not to wait. We have to do it now when we have an ability, because we don't know what will be next year. This is the way we work. About the second, what was the second question, Cyril?
The second question was, will we ever have all the names?
So again, I'll share the numbers with you. As I told you, we did a lot. We almost doubled the amount of names that we have during the last 15 years. But we still have a lot to do. Some 1.1 or 1.2 million names are still missing. Why am I saying between 1.1 and 1.2? Because we used to talk about 6 million, but as I assume you know, that the accurate numbers are some. I mean, there are a lot of discussions, and there were a lot of there was a lot of research that was done about the Jewish victims, and the numbers are varied between some 5.4 to 6.2. The recent research done by the Yad Vashem researchers, Professor Israel Gutman and Dr. Rob Rosette, and were published in the Encyclopedia of the Shoah some 30 years ago, are varied between 5.6 and 5.9. So we assume at Yad Vashem that it's close to 6 million, but not exactly 6 million. Actually, it was examined from a lot of ways, but the most regular one is to count how many Jews we had before the war and how many survivors we have, so and to eliminate the numbers. So this is, and then a lot of problems are coming from the east, because the counting there was not always accurate, and a lot of other issues. But again, all the countings are something around those numbers. So if we have some 4.8 million names, so it means that we still have some 1.1, 1.2 million missing names. The last mile is the most difficult, because we used all the more known documents and lists that we have. And as I showed you, we are now trying to use a very sophisticated, out-of-the-box way to find solutions for the missing names, especially, as I said, in the East, where we don't have anyone who may tell us what happened except of documents that in a lot of cases were vanished as well. So we have to use a lot of new ways to do it, and this is what we are now trying to do, to find, and we have a few channels that we are using. So we will not leave the job or leave the mission before we will find the last name, but it is becoming much and much more complicated. And even if we will find, as I mentioned before, the last name, we will still continue to try to find more information about the life stories of all the rest. Because I think, as I said, that it is not enough to have the name, but also to reconstruct the histories. But the challenge is becoming much more complicated, and this is why, for example, working with big data, new ways of working, which Yad Vashem is one of the leaders of, is the way to handle it, or other new ways that we are now trying to use.
Thank you, Haim, for a really interesting and enlightening lecture. The word zachor, remember, is integral to our Jewish history. As you have just explained, Jewish men, women, and children were systematically murdered during the Shoah, some without a trace, and it is our duty to honor and remember them and gather all the fragments using the latest technology. Thank you to all who work tirelessly at Yad Vashem to preserve the names and document the memory of as many Holocaust victims as possible. We all look forward to Yad Vashem reopening its doors to the public in the near future. Meanwhile, keep well and safe.